So let me ask you, I want to start in the current and then move backward a little bit. Last year, your story was one of the stories that was used by Ann Williams in the discussion for Illinois to have a marriage bill. How did that come about, that Ann knew that she could say that publicly?
Ann and I had been close friends at the Office of the Attorney General, and when Ann and I first started working together in '03, I was really still grieving much of my life with Penny, and there were often days that I certainly didn't look my best, let's put it that way. Ann, who was very caring and kind, picked up on that, and I disclosed the story to Ann, that Penny and I had been together for 5 years, and the whole story that came after. So Ann, for the last 10 years, has been a close friend and has seen me, struggle at different points. She shared great happiness with me with my life in Philadelphia and my current partner. And when marriage equality was coming up, she had said to me, I know this has never been told publicly, but I would like to tell your story on the House floor. And I knew that if Ann had the chance to speak, Ann would do it well and right. And I was ready for it. And I said, yes, you can do that. And so that's how that back piece came about, for Ann to tell the story on the House floor.
How far along were you in the book process at the point in 2013 when Ann did that?
In 2013, I had already had an agent at that point. I'd gotten an agent in 2011. And then I started writing in earnest when when we had a contract the following year. So I had had a contract at that point, so the whole book took about 10 years. The last 3 were in great earnest, and as it turns out, the book wasn't finished at the time that Ann had read that piece, and it actually became part of the book.
Now, let's move back to your years as a reporter in Springfield. When did you start work in Springfield, in what capacity?
Right. I transferred with the Associated Press. I had been in Pennsylvania and in New Jersey, and then I took job of State House correspondent, basically the State House bureau chief, for the Associated Press in Springfield in February of 1993. January or February of 1993, I became the State House bureau chief in Springfield, Illinois, moving from New Jersey to this post. So in that capacity as State House bureau chief, I was responsible both for the political coverage for the Associated Press in the state of Illinois, House, the Senate, the elections, and for monitoring a staff. I had a staff and a photographer, and I was basically both reporting and management at that juncture.
How did you identify yourself at that point in terms of your sexual orientation or anything else about your life prior to meeting Penny?
Prior to meeting Penny, although I had been involved with women prior to that, I was so deeply homophobic I could not identify as a lesbian. At that point in my life, as far as I was to say, I could love men, I could love women, and I was not looking at my own life honestly at that juncture. So I never identified as a lesbian until 2 years after Penny died.
Now, being a journalist and being openly gay, that different professions present kind of different problems about that. And for journalists of that era, really, the National Gay and Lesbian Journalists Association started around 1991. That was really just becoming acceptable. Were you aware what was going on in journalism with openly LGBT people?
I was, and I was supportive of it, although I was afraid of it. At the time that I was at the AP, what was remarkable to me is some of my closest friends were gay or lesbian and members of that organization, starting members of it. And I always kind of, was on the fray. Like, I was always intrigued, but I held back. The bigger issue, of course, was the unforgivable ethical issue of being, a State House bureau chief for the Associated Press and becoming involved with a state senator.
Right. Yeah, that was the most interesting thing for me as a journalist. I've had to deal with that with some of my reporters over the years. Not disclosing that. So did that complicate the closet for you?
Oh my God. That closet, it was like a shoebox in the closet, right? It wasn't just the closet. First of all, the ethical breach was unforgivable. Once I fell in love with Penny and knew that this was going to be a serious relationship, the proper thing would have been to go to the Associated Press management, explain the situation to them. either transfer or leave. I mean, those would have been pretty much the options. Which, interestingly, I had done when I was dating a man in Pennsylvania. It's in the book, he was a senior advisor to the House Speaker. After the first few dates, I knew that this was, I was going to be involved with him for a while. I went to the head of the AP in Pennsylvania, told him. He said, great, just don't cover the House. And so it was clean, it was simple, it was ethical. However, when I fell in love with Penny, first of all, I didn't even consider myself to be a lesbian. However you work out that machination. Lots of therapy, I guess. And I certainly, there was no way in the world I felt that I could disclose this relationship. And so I tried to minimize that which you cannot minimize. I tried to keep it as ethically clean as I could, but you can't. It's like if I invite you to the house for dinner and I do everything, to the levels of the Department of Health, and then I put a mouse on the plate. You can't, it's not doable. And so what's interesting to me in retrospect, Penny and I discussed the ethical conundrum every single day, and we never were discussing, at that pace at least, the fact that we were in the closet. That came later. But the ethical conundrum, it caused a lot of consternation. There was a lot of, on one hand, people couldn't understand at the AP while I was turning down very big assignments or assigning someone. I was trying to stay away from it. But you couldn't stay away from it. I was still editing. So, it's not, I don't know. I've been asked this a lot, as I should be. It was an unforgivable ethical breach. I would have been rightly fired. Eventually, I extricated myself from that, but for other reasons. But that's just one component of the book that I had to tell, but it's not my favorite part.
Now, what about Penny in terms of how she came to the relationship? Had she ever identified herself, even just to herself, about her sexual orientation or anything?
She had never identified as a lesbian. Again, our discussions were that we just happened to be two women that fell in love. But as time moved on, those discussions became much more intense for us. And so Penny had never been involved with a woman prior to our relationship, and we discussed so many aspects of this. Very early on, though, we talked about how we had to, quote, figure this out, and that we had this show apartment in Springfield while we lived together in Decatur. That became its own complicated ruse. Then when I went to law school, we had an apartment in Chicago and our home in Decatur. And as I was approaching the end of law school, we had many discussions about how we were going to live together, and we just didn't know how we were going to figure this out. But we had started to take steps to come out with family members and with close friends. Of course, you have to keep in mind that Penny's health was always the werewolf that was running next to us. And it bit us many times, her fatally, and we never got there. 3 months before Penny died, we were on our way to... It's very hard at Thanksgiving to say this. It's like, I can't believe I'm getting choked up now, but at Thanksgiving of 1997, we were traveling to Jeffersonville, Indiana, to disclose our relationship to my sister Donna and to her husband Gary, and that was a big one for me because they are lovely people. They're fundamentalist Christians. My sister Donna works for a missionary. She's my biggest ally and fan. But that was a big move for us to do that. The night before, the day we were to leave, Penny passed out and ended up having a tumor on her skull and had the surgery. And she died 3 months later, and we were unable to get that far. Although the night she died, which is also in the book, very tough chapter, very tough experience. I had been out, when you read the context of this, it'll make sense, but I'd been standing out on our deck playing football with her two young nephews, and Penny's sister-in-law came running to the door, motioning me in. Penny wanted me. And so I went in, and there was Penny's family around Penny's bed. She reached for me, and I thought she was going to tell me something. And she kissed me very long and full on the mouth in front of her family, and it was this disclosure, and then said to me, "You be strong." And so, there were all these little pieces, but we never got to the full disclosure of coming out, and it would have been difficult for us. we were prepared for that to the extent that we could be, but it's kind of hard in retrospect to replay that when, you know, we didn't identify as lesbians. Like, you know, so it's not like we were coming out in celebration. We were just telling our family because it became so awkward, like, oh, really, Terry the groupie's around again, you know? Mm-hmm. So...
Yeah. You know, we're talking mid-1990s in Illinois, and certainly LGBT issues were very much at the forefront. The Defense of Marriage Act came up in 96 in Illinois. Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So these issues were debated, and Penny was a Democrat.
Oh, yeah.
A progressive Democrat.
Yep.
And pretty much pro-gay rights. Didn't have to vote on a lot of stuff, but on things like that. So it wasn't about her own politics. A lot of times when you hear about closeted politicians, it's because they're kind of hypocritical, right?
Yeah,
they're anti-gay.
Yeah.
And we have many of them still in office that are anti-gay. But she wasn't anti-gay.
Right.
She wasn't afraid of it.
She wasn't afraid of it, but also it's interesting because just as we were getting a little bit more courage amassed privately, I remember we woke up one morning and the state's attorney in Decatur had come out on this, it was a public mission to rid what he called faggots from the parks. And I remember thinking, this is the moment, because what's going to happen is that teachers and, you know, city council people and firefighters and cops, they're all going to come to the fore here and they're going to speak about this, and this is going to be the moment. And all those people did come to speak in favor of the state's attorney. And so, also during that same window, a woman came to testify, the mother of a sailor.
Dorothy Hages.
Yes, who had been beaten to death on a United States naval vessel, which is just a flag on the American, stain on the American flag to say. But she came and testified, and Penny told me, it was her committee, that while that testifying was occurring, that there were these snickers of other senators. And then when I'm back in the newsroom, you have people saying, you know what, that guy knew better. He shouldn't have been so stupid as to be gay on a Navy ship. So, on one hand, a lot of groundbreaking stuff was happening, and on the other hand, right outside of our front door was some very intense stuff. And I was homophobic. I believe Penny less so. We only ever had one discussion about, in her mind, what God thought about this. But hers was more of a political battle. Mine was more of a spiritual battle in that way. And so we ran out of time. And I firmly believe that had we hadn't, we would have moved toward coming out. I think Penny and I would have always been private in some ways. Because there's a huge difference between privacy and secrecy. And my new rule in my life, particularly having been a victim of sexual assault as a child, unless you're asking me to keep a secret about a birthday party, don't even talk to me, because it's not happening anymore in my life. And this was a very big secret that was toxic. It was a secret that cost me nearly my life, cost me my health. It certainly cost me my home. And you know, it's just the way it played out.
You know, a lot of the reason I think Rachel Maddow was interested and some other folks are interested is because of the Obama connection. I'm interested also because of the Dawn Clark connection.
Right, sure.
And those, you know, Dawn Clark connection was so pro-gay. Yep. I mean, were any of these people that Penny knew were very accepting of this aware at all of your relationship?
That I'm aware of, no. I mean, now we did have some, there were some folks that were close to Penny in the Senate who used to refer to me as the Pennsylvania connection. That was in the book. And so it was basically, in many ways, an open secret. My reporting pals, as I disclose in the book, talk about how we were a parlor game. You know, they'd be smoking cigars and drinking brandy and trying to figure out if Penny and Terry were lovers. The woman who was just here, Jennifer Halperin, who was a dear, dear friend, she pretty much knew. It was never overtly disclosed, but there was always this little sideshow of a chase happening. At one point, I was at her home, and I said I had to leave early to go meet my family, my brother, and I told her I was going to, I forget where, and that Monday she said to me, "Hey, I checked your mileage. You didn't, you know." And Penny and I spent 3 days like, oh my God, should we cover the odometer with an index card? Like, I mean, just crazy stuff. So, Representative Kelly Cassidy told me something last night that I didn't know. She said that that at the funeral that she was there and other people were there. She was not a rep then. She said that the sorrow for me was palpable, but nobody could approach. And I think that's a very accurate statement, because even those small group of people that did try to reach out, I couldn't hack it. I couldn't handle it. So, you know, it was kind of this open secret, but underground.
Mm-hmm. Did Dawn know before Dawn died about this?
Dawn knew before Dawn did know before she died about this, because she and I had had a conversation, and I had sent her, she had spoken about Penny, and I had sent her a very lovely note, and just, you know, about her lovely speech. The note wasn't lovely. Let me start that over. You know, Dawn Clark Netsch, just a, you know, a magnet in her own right, and a visionary here in Illinois, had spoken about Penny, and I had sent her a note and had told her about this relationship, and she sent me a letter back saying that she always wondered, and that she was so happy that Penny found love, and that was it.
And Obama, have you heard anything from Obama?
I have. From his staff, you know, a very good friend of mine was able to get a copy in his hands, and from what I have understood from the email, that he stood and he looked at the book and told the handler that he knew Penny and remembered her, knew me, and then he asked for my home address. And so that was a couple of weeks ago. He is kind of running the world, and so my great hope is that, of course, that not so much that I'll get a note, but that he'll read this, and you know, because he spoke after Penny's funeral, and they ran the interview of that. I mean, he and Penny were friends, so we'll see. Stay tuned.
Any final thoughts about what impact you hope this book has on perhaps other people living these kind of lives?
Right. Well, you know, this isn't just about being gay or straight, or gay or lesbian. It's not about a lifestyle. What this book is about honesty. One of the finest notes I've received was from a woman who I didn't know. She was in southern Indiana now. She was in Fleming, Indiana, actually. She used to live in Decatur. And she told me that she and her partner are 47 and 50, that they're both very healthy, but the day after they read the book, they went and got a will. And that was very meaningful to me. But the other piece is this, I think, no matter what you're doing in your life, if you are a fundamentalist and you're afraid to say you believe in God, or, you know, this is the moment in your life to declare, you know, and so if you're gay, if you're straight, try to live honestly. If you're in an affair, think about what you're doing and why, no matter what that paradigm is. And so for me, it's a story of candor and of saying, I hope that this turns out to be more of a stepping stone than a stumbling block. There's some people who have read this and have known about the book and have called for a boycott of the reading tomorrow in Springfield. And, you know, I understand that that's a stumbling block for them, but my great hope is that people will read this and not make the same mistakes that I and Penny made.